All right, I think I'll let anyone else in as they come, but I'll get started from there. Again, feel free to use the chat if we want to pop in any questions. I'll keep an eye on that as well as we go through, and we'll have time for more questions right at the end. But yeah, definitely, I'll check for questions after each little topic. So yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to another one of our Lectora product support sessions. Again, the main thing with these sessions is it's for you guys. We're trying to give you these sort of tips and tricks that people might not realize or you might have not used for a while, and even just sometimes new updates and things like that that come in. So we're sort of continuing our session like we did last time, which was more to do with some tips and tricks they've probably been there for a while, or just different ways of doing things that can help you either speed things up or help with some common issues and things like that as well. So let's go through here. So just a quick idea of what we've got for today. I think I mentioned this last month. We were going to look at some stuff to do with bullet points and how to sort of manage those and some different things you can do with them. I think we ran out of time for that last time, but I've got that as the first one off the rank there. Similar to that as well, we've got stuff to do with text margins, text blocks in general, breathing room and that sort of stuff, which we can have a look at. A couple more. Oh, I thought I heard someone pop in there. We've also got a little bit about default text in the format painter item. Again, we had a quick look at that. Just wanted to show that more formally as a tool that's really helpful for a couple of different things. And similar again to that with sort of copy pasting, some tips and tricks with pasting without formatting and how that all works as well. There's also a feature that's been in there for a little while, but I think it's pretty underused. We don't have people often talking about it or using it. It's really good to do with templates and things like that, which are the page layouts within Lectora. So we'll have a look at those. From there, we can jump in. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about each thing and then we'll jump into an actual course and play around. So bullet points in Lectora, obviously pretty commonly used. Things like PowerPoint and stuff like that. Obviously, you've got bullet points there. We often find issues to do with the formatting of them, whether they've carried across from somewhere else and they've gone funny. You may add a new bullet point and the point's a different size than the other ones, or we've probably all seen these sort of issues. Maybe you've changed the color of the text and the bullet points didn't change color. Little things like that. I can show you how to go through those as well as just some more control around how to edit the bullet points, make new lines and all that sort of stuff to do with your line spacing. And yeah, indentation, all that sort of stuff. So I'll jump into a course here. Now for this one, I've just opened up what's called a course starter. So within Lectora, some of the sort of modular development tools that they've got available are things like templates, themes. We've probably all seen those. We've also got frameworks, which are more of like a shell of a course with all the functionality but no visual elements. And you can usually combine all these together to make what looks like a course. This is kind of already a combination of those where it's a course that's already set up with existing pages, just all dummy text. And they have functionality in different types of layouts and things like that, but it looks like a full-fledged course. It's just sort of obviously not set up with actual content. So I thought it was good to open up one of those as an example. If you ever want to see those or find them, I just bring up my starting screen. When you go to create a new project, again, we talked about themes, course frameworks. These course starters are found here. So if you ever want to have a look at those, they often use some of the themes that are already available, and they'll have page examples and things like that. There's a ton of them in there as well. So it's also something good to have a look at. I'll go back out of here. So I've just picked one of those to start with today. Jump down to a layout that will probably have some bullet points. Now this one's obviously using some images instead of bullets as well. That's something you can do to get a bit more control. It's not a true bullet point as far as actual lists and things, which usually doesn't matter unless you're doing something to do with accessibility. So accessibility stuff obviously reads bullet points a certain way so that the user knows that it's a bullet point. Again, not something you necessarily need to worry about, but when you're playing around with things like this, I might find a page that's got just some plain text to go bullet points here. So I'm going to add some bullet points into this. We could even just break this existing one up into bullet points. So first of all, I'll just get these back into line here. Just to get something to work with. Don't worry about the grammar, doesn't make sense there, but we'll pop it in. So that's this one. That's my bar. Get them all onto one line. Now, obviously, you can grab bullet points from some other source, if you've worked through a PowerPoint, for example, or you've had some other source where you're copying the text in, if those are in bullet point format, you copy them across, they're obviously going to come over as bullet points as well. I'll talk a bit more about that to do with the copy and pasting and stuff as well. But it's usually always best to create the actual bullet points using Lectora's setting up here instead. So I'm just going to pop these into bullets. And obviously that's your standard bullet point, something we've all seen before. Couple of things about these is obviously the bullet point itself can't be selected. If you're trying to sort of highlight it to do something, you normally can't get to it there. So the first little tip that I've shared for a while, I think, is you can actually select the bullet point. It just exists at the end of the line every time you've created those. So if, for example, we wanted this to be a different color, we could just take the whole text block, change the color. Maybe we wanted red. That's going to look a bit horrible, but red bullet points, that's fine. If you wanted the bullet points to be red, but you don't want the text to be red, I can come back here. And if I actually highlight this empty space at the end of the line and make a change here, it's going to react to just the bullet point. You can do the same thing if you want to resize them, for example. If you want different style of bullet points, you can use that within the same block to do the same. So I can pop that in there. If I want to edit those. Obviously, this is good to try to fix those errors where the bullet points are changing color and you didn't want them to. But if you do want them to, that's how you can do that as well. The funny thing to note with that as well, if I go like this, drop these down a line, might move that, I'll move that little green bar in a second. You'll see that the color has gone back to normal. The tricky thing with multi-line bullet points is that the same thing I've just showed you about the end of the line. It's not the end of the actual sentence, but it's the end of the first line. So this often happens when you're breaking bullet points, and that's where you'll see some errors if you have customized them as well. You actually need to select the end of the line which exists here still. Sometimes it's tricky to get that with the mouse, so I'm trying to highlight it here, and it looks like it unhighlights. You can also use your keyboard to do that. So if you place your cursor and hold down Shift, move the arrow across, it's technically highlighting that, and I can then make it red again. The little things like that can help there. You'll often find that will change every time I resize this as well. So whenever that line changes, it's a new spot that's actually not formatting correctly. So you can do things like that. And this is the sort of stuff that won't work the same way when it's copied over from somewhere else. So if you've copy and pasted from somewhere with bullet points, I usually recommend to remove the bullet points that have come with it and re-add them from Lectora as well, which is sometimes a little bit of a pain, but it gives you that control when you're back in here as well. On that note, with the extra lines, sometimes you may want a bullet point to drop down another line like this, but you need your text block to be a certain size for some reason. Maybe you've got text further down that needs to be a certain width. In the past, you'd have to sort of create multiple text blocks and make one this wide and one this wide, and that can get a little bit messy. But another little tip you can do when you're within the bullet points here, normally if I hit enter to add a new line, if I go like this, it creates a new bullet point. But if you hold down Shift instead, oh, that's space. Keyboards move over a little bit. Hold down Shift and hit Enter. It'll create a new line, but keep it within the same bullet point. So you've got a bit more control over that as well. And that way I can keep my text block all the way out here. So maybe this part of the text was in the same text block and I want that width, but I don't want that bullet point to work that way. You can do the same thing as well. So now no matter where I've got this sitting, it's going to sort of fit there. So that Shift Enter is a really good thing for bullet points to do with that. Another little thing there I mentioned about indentation with bullet points as well. Obviously, you can do things like that. If I want this one to move across, there's a couple of different ways. You can use the tab on your keyboard that moves it across. Depending on how the bullet points have been set up, it may do something like that, which is not what we want. If you want to actually indent it properly, we've got some indentation settings up the top here as well. So you can bump it across, move it back. Depending on where that source is from as well, you'll find often in things like Word, when you do that, it'll actually change the bullet point to a different style. Sometimes you have the solid dot and then the indented one's like a ring or something like that. You can manually set that as well. So if you want to manage this across, you've got some settings to do with your bullets here. So next to my bullets, I can choose these to be whatever I want them to be, and it'll adjust those depending on which one I'm selecting. So this is where we start to see some of these issues we've seen recently where people are trying to control things like indentation, custom bullet points, and all that sort of stuff. It's really tricky to select those correctly. So what I can usually do here is indent that one across and make sure that's the one that's selected. and then it will actually change it to the, nope, that's going to make me a liar again. This is the trickiness that we have. Back here. And it's not going to do it now. Depending on what we're doing here. I'll have a bit of a play with that one. I'll look at the line spacing because that sometimes has stuff to do with it as well. So it could be doing something there. It's back across. Get a bit of space there. Obviously, the other thing with line spacing there, I'll jump ahead. Within any text block, whether it's bullet points or not, you've got the options to adjust your paragraph spacing. That can be just the lines themselves, so every single line will have a certain spacing. Some people have that in their branding guidelines that they need it to be set to a certain line weight or whatever it needs to be. You also have these two items here, which are to do with how much space is after a full paragraph. So essentially, whenever you've hit enter as a full return, it's going to count that as well. So depending on what you're doing with bullet points, you may want that before or after that point. And that's where you can control those individual pieces. So for example, with this one, if I set these lines to, I'll change it back to single so they're close together, but then I want my actual space between the bullets to be larger. I can actually increase that. And what it does there is increases the space between each bullet, but not between multi-lines. So this is still the same bullet, it keeps it closer together. Otherwise you have that really big spacing that looks a little bit strange. If I do the same thing here, make it a bit more obvious. So something like that, you can see that that multi-line one still sticks together because we've created that into one bullet point as well. Now I'm going to see if this is going to let me do this indent thing again. You try one more time, otherwise I'll go back to the drawing board with that one. That's going to treat it as a whole thing. What I'll do is double check my little setting here. No, okay, something's changed there. That's okay, we can ignore that part, but yeah, just to do with things like that. Like I said, the best case with bullet points is always to just create them in Lectora itself. Sometimes you'll find if they've been dragged in from somewhere else and pasted, you'll see the bullets maybe aren't actually visible, but the selection is here, or vice versa, and that's because it's sort of Lectora hasn't created the bullets, it's just dragged them in from somewhere else. And you'll often find when you paste them in, it's better to just remove that formatting and pop it back in separately from there. I think that was it from the bullet point stuff. Has anybody got any questions on any of that? And again, that was just from a sort of recent issue someone was having with managing those. Everyone's okay with that one?
That's a huge thank you. That's a massive, something that we had doing some updates on a course. That was probably a month or two back. And that colouring of the bullets different to the text was driving us absolutely mental. So that's a huge, huge tip, and some other good ones in there as well. Thanks, Will.
No worries. I'll also note as well, I should sort of do this in these sessions as well. Sometimes with Lectora Online, there's slight differences because Lectora Online's got a different interface for customizing bullets. So rather than just this little sort of window here, there is actually a different window that gives you more control there. But these same tips will still work as far as the keyboard goes. You may just be able to get away with more stuff in Lectora Online because of the interface. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful for some of that stuff. Let me jump back over here. Always good to hear when I show something that actually matters. Okay, so let's jump over to text margins and breathing room. I already had a bit of a look at that with that text block you may have seen, but I'll talk a bit more about it as well. Obviously, text block's probably the most basic element of any Lectora course. It's probably the thing you use the most, but there's still some little bits that people may or may not use often. Let me find a good page that I want to play with here. Title's got a little bit of text to go. Might do something with this one. So a couple of things, again, some of these are probably obvious, but I always like to just point things out in case they are one of those little sort of gaps that have missed from things. So everything to do with text here as far as the style and things like that, anything to do with margins or formatting is usually sitting here within the style tab. Obviously outside of things to do with line spacing, paragraph stuff. One thing that I mentioned there is the margin. So text blocks by default will have a 0 margin, so the text goes right to the edge. And that's what you're seeing here. If you're wanting to have that sort of bit of extra space, the most common thing where you would see that would be if you've got a text block with like a different colored background. Looks funny to have it right on the background there. So if I change the background color here to, let's say, orange, obviously the colors look horrible, but the actual formatting of that also looks horrible. Let's do one that actually looks nice, so we don't have to look at that. Let me bring that up here. Try like a gray or something so it stands out there. You can even change the text color thing around. So something like that is a pretty common thing you would see. It's a good sort of style option to have that text sort of stand out a bit. For the margin, if I increase this here to 10, say, that's just the amount of space between the edge and the text. A big thing to double check there is that you haven't then shifted some of your text around. So if this was really, really close to the edge like this before, and I had a 0 margin, that may have fit before, and maybe I had that really tight right up to the edges for whatever reason. If I then increase that margin, obviously you see it then causes the problem, cuts the text off, and your text is dropping down the bottom as well. So
that manages the margin the entire way around. It's not just on the left or the top; it's the whole way around that text box.
So it doesn't have an option for sort of like top bottom margins or things like that. Within this case, it's always just full around. It's sort of like an extra border before the text is there. So you'll see from both sides it'll do the same. So as soon as I get to that edge, it's going to cut it off, and that will fix that up as well. You'll see that obviously the text cutting off there is a big thing. So when I'm talking about breathing room, I'm normally talking about how much space your text block has around the text. So that first example I had where I made it really tight to the edges, that may be what you want it to look like. If there's no background on the text, there's maybe no reason to worry about that. But when you're working with different browsers or different views and things like that, there may be slight changes between the spaces between the letters, between the spaces between the lines as well. And if you're using it that sort of tight, then it'll sort of drop it down completely as well. So you just got to watch that sort of thing as far as leaving that little bit of extra space. Obviously, when you have a margin, that extra space is visible. So you obviously got to be careful with that. You can't just say, okay, I'll make this text block this big just in case it doesn't cut off. That's going to sort of cut that side bit. Whereas, if you're keeping it right to the edge, that margin may change depending on what you're working with. A quick little trick as well that I often say if I'm working with object height, so with the text, I may have applied my margin later and it's cut something off. Rather than me having to go here and go, oh, how do I want that to be? I want it to be almost right there. Leave a little extra room. Fiddling around with that can always be a bit of a pain. If you ever want to, you can double click the text like this and it will resize the box to fit whatever's inside it. It'll always do the height of that. So what I normally do when I'm building is decide my width. And when I'm happy with the width, I then double click to hit the height down. So you can always start with really tight text up like this. And I say, okay, I would definitely want it to go halfway across the screen without me having to work out how much that fits. I just double click and it drops down. So a really quick one for copying and pasting text over, double clicking and it drops it down as well. And that also works obviously within the margins. So if you're having that same problem where the margins then cut it off a little bit, you hit your double click and it drops it back down. So it makes a little bit extra space. That's sort of the minimum amount of space it's going to add as far as the margin goes. It should be enough for most browsers to then fit. Whereas, if you ever have trouble seeing it between one browser or another, you can always just give it a little bit of extra. You never have to worry about those sort of the sides because they just dictate whether it's going to drop a line. So if you're really close to one word, you'll see that drops the line down. In this case, either way, it's 3 lines, so we've got a bit more room to wiggle with. Whereas if it's sort of a little bit more, that's when you get that extra height that you got to worry about. So some things like that to do with formatting as well. That other tip that I mentioned to do with the dropping the extra line down when you're needing to, that also applies here. So for example, if I get it to about here, there may be some reason I want this box to be this wide, but I don't want this this last word here to be in the way of anything. I can actually force that down a line by either hitting enter or doing that shift enter as well. And that'll just make sure it forces it down there. So there is actually that extra space there. It's never going to cut that off because you've sort of cut it off yourself. So that's always a good thing. You just got to double check then if you do resize it, you remember you added that space so you don't end up with something like that happening. You can control when it drops a line instead of waiting for Lectora to accidentally drop it down as well. So obviously depending on the visual layout of certain pages, that can be useful in different ways. Again, if you haven't got a background color or any of that set up, you may not need to worry about as much with the margins and things like that. I often see courses where people have set up where there is a margin on the text block, but there is no color concern, and I often wonder sort of why that is, because it makes your sort of text look like it's slightly off, because when we're not clicking anything, it's over slightly because the box is lined up, but the text isn't. So I'd always have, if it's transparent background, I would always have the text without the margin. But it just depends on the layout and what you're working with, what you're trying to do. So hopefully that helps. That makes sense for that one as well. Like I said, adding that little bit extra breathing room is always good, depending on how the browser is going to treat everything, and especially for, if it's a transparent box, then you've got that freedom to resize this as much as you want to control that text. The only thing you need to worry about as well, I often mention, even though the text block is transparent or you can't see through it, it does block objects. So text block going all the way out to here for whatever reason, if I had that bottom all the way down, that's technically blocking these buttons, even though you can see through them. So a really common issue I see is someone sort of saying, oh, I come into my course and I can't click these buttons for some reason. They can't figure out why. A quick way for me to check that is also just open the page and Control A to select everything on there, and it'll sort of highlight where the boxes are. So you can quickly see, okay, this box is past these buttons. We'll double check that. We don't need that much space. Even if you wanted that width, we can just bring that up a little bit to here. Also a quick one to double check. So transparent objects still block stuff. We often used to use that on purpose to obviously block items before we could disable buttons and things like that. But obviously now we've got control over that to play around with. There we go. Okay. Any more questions on that sort of stuff? I see a question there back about the bullet points. I might have to have a closer look at that one depending on what's being selected with the colors. Sometimes there's little funny ways of selecting, but I can have a closer look at that as well. All right, back over here. Okay. All right, I talked a little bit about this just with text in general, but default text I think is something that's often sort of overlooked or missed. It is helpful to use the default text in the course to help save you having to edit text all the time. If you know what your body text is meant to be within a course, you can set that as the default text versus each text block having to be selected, change the color, change the font, etc. You often want to set that within a template or at least at the start of your build, so you know that text that you're copying in is going to pick up that font as well. So a couple places where the default text actually applies. Anywhere where you've created an object that has text with it automatically, so things like questions. If you create a question and you haven't manually set the text on those, all the question items will be the default text. Also, when we're talking about copy and pasting unformatted, which I mentioned before, when you strip the format from wherever the source is, it uses the default text instead. So that's sort of how you can manually create that that option. A pretty common thing we see, if I jump back into my course here, a pretty common mistake is to confuse the text settings here, especially if I select the text block. I've got my text settings here. This is relating to this text block that I've selected. Whereas if I'm in the design tab, we've got a text setting here as well. That is the default text. So people often will select the text block, go to design, and go to change the text, the font there. It may still change that text block, because if that text block was already set up as default, changing the default text will change it. So you can miss that you've made that mistake. The thing with the default text is that any text has been added in as default into Lectora and not edited afterwards will then be changed as sort of like a sweep if you change this again. So that's really handy if you need that to happen. If you purposely set up certain parts of your body text and you know that they're set to be the default text, you can then down the track set them all or reset them all. If there's some kind of branding change, you may change sort of branding colors or branding guidelines or something like that, and your default text needs to change for your body. That can automatically change that if they've been set up correctly that way. If I so much as change this at all from the base, it'll then be its own sort of text block and stick to that as well. So just making use of that can save you some time if you've done it the right way around. Obviously things like headings or any other sort of special text that comes up, you'd want that to be its own text font and things like that anyway. But the text in this default is the main thing to look at there as well. When you do change anything in this area, whether it's the style or the color or any of this stuff, it'll ask you if you want to change everything in the course. So it does give you that little warning. I still see it happen pretty often accidentally, but you'll get that little warning before you change something. So if I say I want this to be Forte, which is probably not good, it's going to ask me to change all of that new text as well. You can then have that chance to say, well, hang on, before I change that stuff as well. Really quick way to check whether you've got the wrong one selected, as well as if you don't have a text block selected, the Home tab text is all grayed out because we've not selected anything. I usually try to sort of advise to watch out for that one. And popping into the design back here as well with the default, you can obviously set anything you want here. You can use your own text style and create that, knowing that it is just the one setting as the default text. But if you've got that set up in a template, you may have that saved as your own text style as well. A couple of things that have come up before, things like if you have your default text set to, say, white, for example, because like in this course, we probably have majority of the text as white with these backgrounds. Sometimes that can cause an issue where it's transparent, or I've seen things disappear because the bullet points have disappeared or something's disappeared because the color setting in the default text hasn't sort of lined up. So a really quick way to check that, if a text block's changing color that you didn't specifically tell it to change, double check the default text as well and make sure that that's going to sort of match what you're trying to do there. Same thing goes there for hyperlinks. I think we've probably all seen those as well. This is just what color your hyperlink's going to be. Again, it's by default. So if you create a hyperlink, that's just what color it's going to be to start with. You can customize the color of your hyperlinks all you want, but this is that sort of global setting if you want to have that applied as well. Again, I think with accessibility stuff, it either has to be this standard sort of color or there's some sort of contrast that needs to meet as well. So you can always double check that sort of stuff as well. Moving on from the default text side of things, I did also mention to do with the format painter. So in the interest of sort of time saving when you're building, the default text can help you because the bulk of your course would probably be body text. If you've used the default for that, that saves you time having to change that setting. If you ever need to set one text block to match another without having to go in and do the correct line spacing, font, color, all this sort of stuff, you can make use of this style painter here. So the style painter will work with anything to do with sort of fonts and colors here, as well as most of the items to do with the style. So background color, border weight, all that sort of stuff. If you've set a text block like this one, what did we do before? We set it to, say, gray, and I changed the color here, black, so that fits. I even added a margin, something like that. If I decided I want this course to look like this instead, I can then go to other pages. Say, I'll find one first. So say I've got this one here. I can jump back to this page, select my sort of source style that I want, and then turn on the style painter. And then the next object I click is going to interact with that color. So if I jump down to this page and then I click on this, you'll see I have that little sort of paint roller icon, so you can tell it's active. If I then click on this, it's going to change that to match. And I can do that repeatedly. So from this page now, I can do it without leaving the page. Changing the font size as well. You can see I can go through all that stuff. I think I've played around with setting a custom, what's it called, keyboard shortcut to turn that on and off, because it could be even faster that way. And I can then get these to all match there as well. Obviously, depending on what I'm doing, I might have to tweak some of these things like that. That can blow out a little bit. Quickly match these sizes. That's something we can have a look at in another session. I can quickly just match these sizes up and increase the size there, depending on how I want that to work. Resize this down. Obviously, overlapping text blocks can play around a little bit. Resize those sizes. So you can really quickly match that. The really good thing about the style painter that I've found as well is that it works with images, especially buttons. I've probably used it the most with buttons. You can set your own sort of default button, but if you haven't created the button in that time or in that template, you've then got to go set that. The other thing with buttons is that you have the different button states we talked about last time. The style painter will actually do the button states as well. So the only way to edit those button states otherwise is to go in to each state and change them. Whereas if you've then got one that's a master button, that one's set the right way, same colors, same text and everything, the style painter will just hit all those elements on the next button you click as well. So really time saving for things like that. But yeah, style painter is really handy. I find it Really helpful for text, things like anywhere you got to jump between different tabs as well. So like I said, the text fonts here, I had to pick the font, I had to pick the color, then I go to the style tab and pick the margin and the background. It's just sort of multiple steps you've got to jump around, whereas I've just hit that with one click on the style painter instead as well. So super helpful for that sort of stuff. Hopefully, if you haven't used it much, let me know, or yeah, if you're going to start using it now, let me know as well. So the style painter is pretty helpful. All right, jumping back over here. Next up, I've mentioned this on and off anyway because it's been pretty relevant, but I'll talk about it officially now as well. Copy and pasting. So obviously, pretty common process for building things in Lectora would be you've got a storyboard. It might be a Word document. It might be a PowerPoint file. Maybe you've got some other source PDF or even a website you're pulling information from your own sources. And it's pretty easy to just sort of copy, paste, bring that over. Obviously then setting the same fonts and everything's tricky. You've got to then say, okay, change this text block to that font, which you could use the style painter to help with. But to speed that up, especially with things like your default text, I always recommend to paste unformatted, which is an option you can do. When you're within Lectora here, depending on what you're pasting, let me just copy this so I've got something to copy using the keyboard here. What you can do is right click to paste, and you'll always see this option underneath the normal paste option. You've got paste unformatted text. For anyone who really likes keyboard shortcuts, instead of Control V for paste here, it doesn't show you in the list, but Control Shift V will paste unformatted. And that's actually true within tons of other places. So Microsoft products, Word, PowerPoint, any of those things will do the same. So pasting unformatted will just drop off any formatting that came from where it was. And that includes, yeah, font, style, color, bullet points, whatever it is, and it'll match where you're pasting it to. In things like Word, it'll match to whatever the last thing you've selected. So wherever you are in the Word document, it'll just match the one that was there. I often even do it in emails. You can paste unformatted in an email and it just keeps your same sort of style if you copied from another source. The difference there in Lectora, as I mentioned, is you've got your default text setting as well. Whenever Lectora is in a place where it hasn't got any sort of formatting to decide on, if there's no existing text to grab it from, it's going to use that default text as well. So for your body text, especially if you've set up your default font correctly and you paste unformatted when you copy things in, it'll always just match that exact font and be exactly what you want as well. So yeah, that's the unformatted sort of option. The other stuff I've talked about to do with things like bullet points and other things is more of a technical issue. So pasting formatted text from other sources can bring over just funny bugs and things within the text from where it's come from, and that's just due to the difference in the way Lectora might create bullet points versus how PowerPoint does. The different settings in different tools can do different things with bullet points and sizing and colors and all that sort of stuff. I'd say it's always best to just paste anything unformatted into Lectora and do it that way. For the example of bullet points I mentioned, you'll paste them in. If you do unformatted, you'll see bullet points there, but you can actually select them. They're not real. It's like it's sort of emulated the bullet point as text, and then you just backspace them and actually put the actual bullet points in Lectora here. And that just makes sure there's no sort of funny little thingy. So bullet points themselves are already sort of tricky, especially if you're doing sort of, yeah, bullet points and colors and formatting and other stuff. It's best to just leave it all within one place instead of bringing over sort of what we talk about, cursors and things from other tools and making different things sort of happen within the tool there as well. So yeah, pasting unformatted is always the best option for that sort of stuff, wherever you're bringing it over from. Keyboard shortcut again, Control Shift V. Even if I'm not intending to paste unformatted, I think I just paste that way instead now. I just always do Control Shift V. If it's a tool that doesn't do formatting stuff, it'll still paste. It doesn't stop you from doing it. So just as a habit, I just paste that way in anything I'm using. So that's pretty handy for that one as well. Any questions on the formatting stuff? Yeah. I think that's one probably, if you've ever worked with me before, you've probably heard that one before anyway, because I do often talk about that. Big thing for fixing little funny issues and stuff like that as well. All right. So last sort of main item here is to do with page layouts. So obviously that term means something, and just the layout of a page is a thing. But within Lectora, there are actual tools and features to do with page layouts. I mentioned this was to do with the modular development stuff that they've worked with. So if you're working with themes, frameworks, all this sort of stuff, this is part of that to be a bit of a sort of time saver on creating pages. What this is, within the home tab here, you've got sort of structure elements we normally talk about. You would have seen the add page button before. The default there is normally add a blank page. So this is sitting at the top. You may have never actually clicked the little arrow underneath that because you always just add a page. If you use the shortcut over here instead to add a page, again, it's just that default option. But it's actually got an extensive list of types of pages you can add in. So if I add in a new page that's blank, that's sort of your standard thing that you would see often. I've added a new page. It's kept my inherited elements and all that sort of stuff is there as well to set it up the top there. But if I want to use a different style instead, I can actually get a bit of a shortcut on my layout. So adding a page, I can just pick a random one here. You can have text with media rows. Let me try that one. And what that adds is the actual layout of the page. And this makes use of these sort of dummy objects, which are sort of placeholders, which you won't actually see in Lectora any other way, because normally you're adding stuff in, you're adding text. You will see it when you add a text block. If it's empty, it'll always have this double click here to add text part of it. You would have seen that before. That's part of that sort of placeholder object. But we've also now got placeholders for different types of objects. So this is an image placeholder. It's sitting there with a size and a position, and we can then dictate sort of where we want that image to be, what we want it to be as well from file. And it's more about the position on the page. So you can really quickly add a bunch of layouts. Even if you're just needing ideas for a new way to sort of lay out a page, you know you've got something in a storyboard that's got a video and text. So I can say, okay, I want a video and text column type page. And obviously you can add a text block, resize it to half the width. You can add a video, resize it. This is just that extra step of sort of getting that placed in there. The big thing that's really cool with this is that you can actually create your own custom ones of these. So let me grab this. What's a good one that's different? So this is sort of a different type of page, for example. I can go in here to that list, and instead of picking one of these objects, I can save the current page as a new layout. So if I want to do that, and whatever they've called it is just 50/50 layout. Okay. And I've now created a type of page, which is this 50/50 layout. If I add a new page, which I should see it there at the top, any of the new ones you add yourself will sit at the top there as well. Might be alphabetical of your own. I can't tell because it's got numbers, so it might have gone to the top anyway. But if I pop that open, now creating a new page with those elements sort of sitting there. So it looked a little bit funny depending on what they were, but it's basically laid out that text based on where that page was. So this one had text block here, text block here, text block here. It also had the image sitting at the top. And that's now created that as part of those elements. It's done something funny with my image here. And what was on that page might have been something else that was sitting there. It's got some other elements as well. So you've obviously got to watch what's on the page there. But little things like that, it's going to add in for you. If it's too complicated, you can see this one's got things like groups and stuff. It's obviously not been able to figure that out. But if you do have sort of basic layouts of pages with objects, it'll then create that as well. You can also use one of the existing layouts. So say I really like this text and media layout, and I've added my text in, but I wanted my text to go more like this or something. You can do that. You can then save that over and make a new one of those as well. So you can keep saving those, and that's something that can be available for people to then use as the existing pages. So we often talk about things like templates being like a living document where you've added new types of pages, then other users can then create that type of page again. This is part of that as well. So creating those sort of page layouts is really handy for that type of thing. And it is just like a quick shortcut to then apply things like that as well. The one other element, which it's tricky to have one set up ready for it, but you can also apply a layout to an existing page. Depending on what's in the layout and what's on the page, you'll have different sort of experiences with that. But there is a way to have that so that you've dropped the information in and then you're applying a layout to that page so that other elements, like if you've got actions or groups or anything else on the page that you want to keep there, it applies those other things over the top as well. So it's almost like adding a layout into the top of a page that's already got some other stuff on it. We can even just do a quick test of what's going to happen to this one. In this case, it's just added that stuff over the top of what was there. But yeah, you can get a bit more complicated with those. Again, it's more just to do with the position of objects and what the objects are. as far as placeholders go. It won't bring over things like actions and other stuff like that, but it is really good for exactly that, layouts, visual stuff, and positioning as well, which is really handy. And yeah, you can sort of manage those things as well. When you've got a bunch of those, if you've got a bit of a sort of list of those, you've also got options to manage them as well, including the ones that are already there. You can actually then also import and export those. So if someone else may have made a really cool one, you can export that. If it's not already in like a template or something you've done, you can export that and save it in a way where someone else can open it and work on it as well. You can that sharing sort of thing between different courses and different people as well. So it's really handy for, yeah, just really quick stuff with layouts of objects and things like that. So on top of that, with the other stuff, we've got like wireframes and things which are existing sort of functional pages. You've then got the more sort of visual structural side of stuff that can be saved over the top as well. Yeah, hopefully that all makes sense. It's something that we play around with a little bit. It's definitely something that could be handy if used correctly. Just want to make sure people are aware of it and what's there as well. Okay. Jumping back in here, just one last little thing. I think that was the last sort of item I was looking at, but I did also want to take the chance in this session. We often talk about sort of updates and things like that on different tools. It's not specifically Lectora, but we have had some recent updates with Micro Builder. I want to talk a little bit about that. So if you haven't already heard of it or seen it, Micro Builder is a new tool that sort of with the Lectora suite, which is sort of that more simple drag and drop sort of item based thing where you can add some really quick elements to that sort of scrolling course style as well. They do some cool stuff in there, like these avatar videos, which you pop in some text and it creates a video of an actual person speaking to you using that text as well. And they're really good. They're really reusable. You can create them in the AI toolkit, which we've talked about before, and they can be used in other tools. So you can create these AI avatar videos and move them over into other tools. The big thing that's sort of changed there recently is to do with translations. Microbuilder is really good with translations. You can translate the whole course in sort of under a minute and it'll create a new version of it with the translation. We even got a little sort of menu. You can say, okay, switch this to French, switch this to English. It also does that with those avatar videos. So depending on what language you've selected, it will actually do the voice, it will do the subtitles and change it over with that translation in mind. And they just added a bit more control over that translation. So certain voices may only have a male option within the translation. It'll dictate where that is and where that's available. And you can also specify a default voice that you want it to be. Even though it's a sort of male video, you can have sort of the female translation voice over the top and little things like that, a bit more control over how that works. The other cool thing there to do with quiz questions. So again, Microbuilder uses a lot of this sort of AI stuff. You can use AI to generate the questions themselves based on the content in the course. On top of that, now they've added a feature to the feedback on questions where you can actually have AI create the feedback based on the question. So it'll create the text that says, yes, that's correct because of etc. Or no, try again, you've missed this sort of information. And that's something that's sort of being built out now as well. So I just wanted to sort of point that out for anyone who's playing around with that or have it already or want to have a look at it. If you need any more information on Microbuilder, definitely let us know. We can do demos for people specifically if it sounds interesting. We can have a look at that sort of stuff as well. But yeah, just wanted to pop that in with any sort of new updates that pop up.
Will, sorry, it's Juliana here. Sorry, did you say Microbuilder is an add-on onto Lectora? Is it something you have to add on or have a subscription to, or does it automatically come with?
Yeah, so it is a separate tool. I think we've been including it with some deals and things like that as well, but it's something we can sort of talk about with each contract and things like that as well. It is a separate tool from Lectora, but again, it's like how they've got their VR tool. It's made by the same people, so it's part of that sort of suite. But it's definitely something we can look at if it's of interest as well. But definitely let us know. We can put more information about that as well. Yeah, that was all I had for those sort of updates, and then we can jump back if there are any other questions that we missed, or if anyone's had any support stuff. This is sort of that chance to bring something up, and we can have a quick chat about it if there's any interest as well, or anything that we've covered in today's session, or even something else. If you've had troubles with something, might be something I can quickly answer now, and that'll help everyone else. Or if it's a larger item, we can bring it into another session, or even just take it offline as well. Any questions there? second. Pop this over to the vending screen there as well. We've also got our support email. If you do think of something after the session, you can send through. Like we said, we often bring these items into future sessions as well if it's something that's worth looking at. Most of these ones that come up have either been something that someone's recently had an issue with or have even been brought up in these sessions, and we bring them up as well. So if anyone else had any questions or anything there? Sounds like we're all good. Pop it in the chat if you need to as well. Otherwise, we're all good for today. Okay, so again, if you think of anything else, let us know. We do these monthly. You usually, if you've got received the email for it this time, you'll get it again. And if anyone else is sort of interested, tell people that might be interested that may not have got it, and you can talk about it. Before each sort of session, we're also happy to, if you send in any items, say, can you please cover this? We're also happy to do that. We come up with some topics that we think are sort of helpful, but if there's things that in the community that people are having trouble with, or things that we see coming up often, definitely want to add those things in as well. So these sessions are for you guys, so definitely bring in anything you need. We're good from there. Yeah.
Hi, Will. Sorry, it's been great. I've learnt heaps today. You've mentioned things you've discovered in other sessions. I haven't been to a session before. Is there access to a recording of other sessions?
Yeah, so we have been recording each session. I think we're looking at getting them up somewhere that people can look at. We normally, it's sort of a make sure you come to the session to get the recording type thing, but I think the past ones we've been trying to put up to be helpful for other people as well. So there may be a hub for that soon if we sort of work that part out, but otherwise, we can definitely, you'll get this one if you need it, if you've missed any part of it as well. We can work that out from there.
Yeah, I've taken notes. It's just the ones you keep saying, oh, we've referred to that before. I think, what the?
You missed out on something.
Missed out on some things. So.
All good. Yeah.
Anyway,
no, we won't. I don't think we put them up sort of everywhere because then people might just wait for the recording and not jump in the session, but that's okay. All good.
Thanks.
Don't worry. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Will.
Full of good tips on the next one.